welcome to this dose response relationship module. In this particular module, we will discuss about the dose response relationship, in which suppose anybody get contaminated with any kind of toxic substance, what are the responses, what are the different parameter deal with the responses, and how, because this particular information is essential, especially when we need to detoxify or we need to overcome the effect of those toxicants to the human body. It is closely related to our day-to-day affair. It is closely related to our knowledge to the medicines, etc. And one more thing is essential, that the knowledge about our body system is quite important in that while we are studying this dose response relationship. Now, the biological organs, they are responsive in a different manner to the same dose of a toxicant. In the previous module, we discussed that a same type of concentration may be harmful to the younger people or to the older people, but it may not be harmful to the middle-aged people. So, these differences, whatever differences towards the response, they are the result of age, sex, weight or the physical condition, diet, general health and other factors. For example, consider the effect of an irritant vapor on human eyes. Given the same dose of vapor, some individual will barely notice any irritation. This is very weak or a low response, while other individuals will be severely irritated. They are the high response. The other factors are like my body is acclimatized. Suppose I am working in an ammonia environment. So, my body is acclimatized to that particular ammonia concentration which is continuously being released from my workplace. But if a visitor comes, then this particular small quantity of ammonia may be slight irritant to him. So, this is clubbed under the other factor, or sometimes in that particular environment, if a small kid comes, then it may be even fatal for him. Sometimes an older people may come, then again it may be a very difficult scenario for him. So, it all depends on various factors. So, while considering to the dose response curve or while forming those dose response relationship, we must know that what are the different parameters, those who govern this particular type of relationship. Now, before we go ahead with this type of relationship, we must understand that what is threshold dose. The threshold dose suggests that there should be a dose or exposure level below which harmful or adverse effects are not seen in population or an individual. It is just like that if you go to the doctor or a medical practitioner, usually he or she suggests a particular dose for any kind of disease. That is purely based on the information available to him, that what are the symptoms, what is your age, what is your physical condition, and based on this particular information he usually suggests the dose. Maybe OD, maybe BD, once in a day, in a both time of a day, or in a 6-hour duration or 8-hour duration. So, that depends on the information available to him, and maybe 5 mg, maybe 10 mg, etc. So, he needs to find out that what is the threshold. So, this particular information is essential. Now, what is dose? Somebody may ask that what is dose? This is the amount of a chemical or a medicine entering into the body system. This is usually given as a milligram of a chemical per kilogram of body weight, milligram per kg. This dose is dependent on the environmental concentration. The reason is that suppose you are working in a humid environment, then certain chemicals may have a very good affinity with water. They may get absorbed into your body system through either dermal absorption, or it may enter into your body system. So, you must know that what is the environmental condition. What are the properties of the toxicant? You may get this particular information from MSDS, Material Safety Data Sheet. What is the frequency of exposure? Suppose I am working over here, the concentration may be on the higher side compared to the person who is at the corner of this particular room. So what is the frequency of exposures? And sometimes I am working over here, I am exposed to that concentrated toxicant, and then I go to I go outside to the room for a cup of tea. That means the concentration gradually decreases up to the T mark, and then I am coming back. So what is the frequency of exposure? What is the length of exposure? Continuously I am working for 8-hour shift, then definitely the exposure will be on the higher side compared to intermittent exposure. What is the exposure pathway? That is the route of entry. Maybe inhalation, maybe dermal absorption, maybe ingestion, maybe some other route. Now this is a very good example, that is effect of amount on response. Suppose I'm a wine taker, then definitely that how much quantity of wine I am taking, maybe small glass, maybe medium, or maybe larger one. So how much quantity I am taking in a single dose? Maybe a larger pack, maybe smaller one, or maybe medium one. So the response would be different to the body system. Second thing is that how much I am taking in a repeated manner. Like suppose I am taking the same quantity up to say 4, 5, 6 different times, then definitely the response would be different for a single exposure. If it is on the larger size, then definitely response would be different. Now this is a very interesting dose response curve. Suppose you are taking 1 glass of wine, based on your body structure, based on physical condition, you may experience no effect. And if you are acclimatized, then obviously in the subsequent glasses you won't see any kind of effect. But if a small kid takes a glass of wine, then definitely the effect would be more prominent. Then again you start taking second glass, then marginally you will see a response. Sometimes your voice may fluctuating, sometimes your body language says, okay, you are drunken. And if you take third one, then again the effect is on the higher side subsequently. And if you take larger quantity beyond your expectation, beyond your capacity, then definitely you may observe all kind of effect. Even sometimes it may become fatal. So if you plot the dose response curve with the glass of wine, maybe one parameter of your analysis is the percentage difficulty in walking. So primarily you won't see any effect, then slight difficulty in walking, and if you go and sometimes you will fall yourself in a gutter. No doubt it's a very interesting example, but it gives you prima facie information that how we can create that dose versus response curve. Now in engineering perspective, this y-axis may be different, this x-axis may be different. And suppose if you replace this glass of wine x-axis with the medicine or with any kind of toxic substance, and this is towards the response to your body system. So primarily you may experience something is irritating, then it goes into the body system, then it affects the bloodstream, then it goes for the deposition to the or detoxification aspect. So you may experience all kind of effect. So this is the startup of your formation of your dose versus response curve. So while studying this, while creating this dose versus response, we must know that what is the acute exposure. We have already studied in the previous module what are the subchronic exposure and a chronic exposure. Then we must understand that where it goes, maybe the body water may become the part and parcel of fat, may get deposited into the bone marrow or may go into the bones, and where it accumulates. Because sometimes the after effect is a prominent form of study. We must know that how our body reacts in terms of metabolism, how our body breaks it down. It is true, evenly applicable for different type of medicines, and that's why Dr. or medical practitioner, they used to suggest that you take this particular medicine for 6 hours, 8 hours, etc., because their effect will be up to a certain level, and then thereafter it may go into downward trend. Then again you need to repeat the dose. What it turns into, if you are encountered with a toxicant, then after decomposition or after affecting with the body system, what it turns into and how fast it is. Sometimes it may create instantaneous problems, sometimes say after a day, or sometimes say after a week or so. Then you must analyze that how long it takes to go, means these are the time, how much time, and these are the effects. So at the startup, it is just like a medicine theory. At the startup, it works very well, and then over the period of time, the effect is on the lower side. And so at this particular point of time, you need to take another dose so that you can have a sustained effect. But it is not true for toxic substance. Instantaneously, you are taking that toxic substance through 4 routes of entry, instantaneous, and then it may take a longer hours to decontaminate, detoxify your body system. So you need to find out that what is the deficiency, and deficiency is depicted by this particular delta E. Delta E is the effect. So you have to analyze this delta E, because this gives you a very vital clue for your future treatment, because this delta, whatever toxic substance left, it may get deposited into the fatty tissues, etc. So you need to find out this one, because of the inherent ability of our body structure, body system. Our body usually retaliates and start the remedial measures immediately after the intake of that toxic substance. So this is the effect where our body fails to retaliate for those particular toxic substance. So you need to find out this particular delta E. Now usually whenever we study the dose versus response, usually it is desirable to run that test on a larger population and to form this Gaussian distribution curve. Given the same dose, usually in the form of dose versus body mass, determine the number of fraction of individual that have a responses, because again I am giving you a practical example. When methyl isocyanate was released from Union Carbide plant at Bhopal, a large concentration of MIC was released to the nearby people of Union Carbide, and the effect of that particular concentration was different to each and every individual, because the population was comprises of small kid to older people. So the large population was covered under the head. The concentration was common to all. Then only thing is you need to determine the number of fraction of individual that have a responses. They may be small kid, 10, 20, 30% of small kid, even 10, 20, 30% of middle-aged people, maybe a larger quantity of old-aged people. So you need to collect all those responses and number of individual affected, and then you need to form the dose versus response curve, so that you can analyze that which population is get affected more compared to this one and compared to this one, so that you can start a remedial measure for that particular population. Now if your results are not satisfactory, then you need to repeat the test using the different doses. Of course, in the practical sense you can't do. That's why you need to perform these tests in a laboratory scale. Find the average responses to each doses. Then you plot response versus logarithm of the dose. Sometimes you may get this type of sigmoid shaped curve, and this gives a vital information. You need to find out the Gaussian distribution with the help of this mathematical formula. Fx is the probability or a fraction of individual experiencing a specific response. X is the response. Sigma is the standard deviation, and mu is the mean. So you need to find out, you must know that where this average responses are placed. This is the mathematical relationship through which you can find out the mu and the sigma. N is the number of data points, so how much data, how much samples you are collected, and the quantity sigma square is called the variance. You must find out the dose limit values, and these dose limit values are termed in terms of three aspects: EDF, effective dose for F percentage of a population. These are the reversible responses. TDF, toxic doses for F percentage of population, usually undesirable responses, that is irreversible. LDF, lethal dose for F percent of population. Now, before we go ahead, let me tell you one thing, that EDF is reversible, and sometimes if you are working or if toxic release is most favorable condition, because this is the effective dose of percentage of a population. This reflects the average population, average effect. So this is the irreversible response, because based on your response, your body system, your body may reverse this particular effect of toxic substance. These TDF and LDF, usually they are the undesirable one. There are certain susceptibility and variability, and these are the certain parameters. You are young or old, it depends, because your body structure depends on how old you are. If you are young, then based on your immunity, based on other body structure, you may overcome the effect of toxic, male or female. Individuals' variability based on the lifestyle. If your physique is good, then definitely you can overcome those problems. There may be certain genetic difference. Some people may have certain hereditary problems, etc. Then this is one of the most prominent parameter. There are certain species difference, maybe African countries, Asian, European countries. So these are the certain theoretical parameters. Now, before we go into the creation of these dose versus response, we must know that what are the quantitative factors through which we can assess the toxicity, we can assess that how the problem's gravity. The first thing is that LD50, the amount dose of a chemical which produces the death in 50% of population of test animal to which it is administered by any of a variety of methods, usually expressed in terms of milligram per gram. The LC50, the concentration of a chemical in an environment, generally air or water, which produces death in 50% of an exposed population of test animal in specified time, and usually expressed in terms of milligram per liter. Now, the correlation between the amount of exposure and resulting effect usually expressed in these terms. It is equally applicable for medicine, equally applicable for the toxicological studies. Now, if you are having the increasing amount of dose, prima facie you may experience no effect, then giddy, sleepy, sleep, unconsciousness, and even it may lead to the death. So these are the various responses to be recorded, and sometimes fortunately or unfortunately all the accidents in the past, they gave a vital information for the corrective measures in terms of qualitative and quantitative analysis. There are certain lethal doses. LD50, dose required to kill 50% of the population. LC50, the concentration required to kill 50% of the population. So That means you must analyze, if you are working in that particular toxic substance environment, must analyze that how much quantity of the dose and how much concentration is lethal, because these effects are irreversible in nature. Now, the question arises that how are toxicological data be obtained? There are various ways listed in this particular slide through which you can obtain those data. Maybe with the help of animal toxicological studies. Again, you need to look into the various ethical issues. Accidental human overexposure, maybe in terms of different accidents like Bhopal gas tragedy. The data gave a very crucial information about MIC and other activities. There may be certain controlled exposure of human volunteers, although certain government they banned this type of test volunteers. Epidemiological studies, they may be the descriptive, retrospective, that is usually a conventional one, prospective, usually it's a cutting edge things. Now, again, one important aspect is that from where I can get all kind of toxicological information. The prominent source is the material safety data sheet. If you are a chemical company, you are a producer of any chemical, then it is mandatory for you to prepare the material safety data sheet, not only for the product but also whatever chemicals being used in your site. It gives you prominent information about the identity of the chemical. It gives information about the hazardous ingredient. It gives the proper information about the physical and chemical characteristics, because in the previous module we have studied that benzene is available in two phases, liquid and vapor phase. So sometimes, because based on the boiling and boiling point, freezing point, etc., sometimes if your working condition in such designed in such a way that you have to work at elevated temperature, then you cannot overlook the importance of this physical and chemical characteristics. You must have readily available fire and explosion data. This you can have from MSDS, that how whether this particular substance is flammable or inflammable, and sometimes it may create explosion or not. What is the reactivity? Because obviously if any particular substance is reactive in nature, then definitely your intention would not be in such a way to store in a reactive vessel. Like H2SO4 is highly reactive towards the metal. It causes the corrosive property. Now obviously you want to store the H2SO4, concentrated H2SO4 in the metal vessel. And similarly, the other compound like sodium, it requires a specific storage attention. So that's why it is usually stored in the kerosene. You can't store metal sodium in a humid environment. It is in listed health hazard data. The health hazard data is quite essential, not only for the person, those who are working in that particular arena, but for the nearby people, those who are residing at the outside of that particular plant, because it gives an information that if that particular component is hazardous, then how it can impact to the person, those who are working in a nearby area and those who are residing in the nearby area. So you must provide, because if this index is on the higher side, definitely you will be more careful. It is just like if you are working in a kitchen, then you are more careful towards LPG rather than anything else. Then this material safety data sheet, they give you proper information about precautions for safe handling and uses, what kind of control measures need to be adopted in case of any spillover, any release, etc. We will discuss this material safety data sheet in due course of time. Now go back to LD50. This is the quantal responses can be treated as a gradient when data from a population is used. The cumulative proportion of the population responding to a certain dose is plotted versus plotted per dose, 10-30 fold variation with respect to in a population. If mortality is the response, the dose that is lethal to 50% of the population, LD50, can be generated from the curve. So it gives you a precautionary measure that if this particular dose is lethal for the person, those who are either working within the plant or residing outside the plant. Different toxicant can be compared and the lowest dose is most potent. Then you must acquainted that what is exposure pathway. Usually we have discussed in the previous modules the routes and site of exposure. These are the 4 routes through which they can enter into the body system. Injection is purely based on IV, intravenous, intramuscular or intraperitoneal. So typical effectiveness of the route of exposure is IV, it's greater than inhaled, it's greater than intraperitoneal, then intermuscular, ingest and topical. So you must know that what is the exposure pathway. We have already discussed in the previous module about this acute chronic effect, that if acute is less than 24 hours, usually 1 exposure, subacute for 1 month, repeated dose, subchronic 1 to 3 months, repeated doses, chronic greater than 3 months, again it is repeated doses. Now you must know that the distribution, the blood carries the agent to and from its site of action, storage depot, organ of transformation and organ of elimination. Now rate of distribution depends on usually the blood flow, the characteristics of toxicant, affinity for the tissue and the partition coefficient, and this particular distribution of the things may change over time. Again the dominating factor are age, etc. There are certain issues related with the storage and binding. Storage in adipose tissues, very lipophilic compounds like DDT will store in fat and a later part of your life may create a problem. Rapid mobilization of fat can rapidly increase the blood concentration. Storage in bone like chemical analogous to the calcium fluoride, lead and strontium, etc., because the calcium, etc., fluoride, etc., they are the part and parcel of your body structure. Binding to plasma proteins, this can displace the endogenous compounds. Now only free is available for adverse effect or excretion. Already we have discussed about the targeted organs. Systematic toxin is one that affects the entire body or many organ rather than the specific site. Potassium cyanide affect virtually every cell and organ in the body by interfering with the cell's ability to utilize the oxygen. So usually potassium cyanide affects adversely. Toxin may also affect only specific tissues or organs while not producing damage to the body as a whole. Now these specific sites are known as target organs or target tissues. Benzene is a specific organ toxin in that, because toxin, this is a man-made thing, toxin in that it is primarily toxic to the blood forming tissues. Lead is also having the specific organ toxic. However, it has the 3 target organ, kidney, hematopoietic system, CNS, etc. Adverse effect is dependent upon the concentration of active compound at the target site for enough time. Now remember, not all organs are affected equally, because all toxic substances follow a specific route and sometimes the route itself tries to detoxify the things. So you must know that the greater susceptibility of the target organ, the higher concentration of active components. So you must be aware about this thing. Liver, usually the high blood flow, oxidative reactions. Kidney, the high blood flow and the concentrates chemicals. Lung, high blood flow, site of exposure, neurons, oxygen dependent, irreversible damage, etc. Myocardium, oxygen dependent, bone marrow, intestinal mucosa, they are rapidly divided. Now, adverse effect occur at the level of molecule or a cell. So, molecularly chemical can interact with protein, lipid and DNA. Cellularly chemical can interfere with the receptor ligand binding, interfere with the membrane function, interfere with the cellular energy production, bind to biomolecules, perturb with the homeostasis. Now, once this type of thing being analyzed, then we should analyze the excretion aspect. The toxicants are usually eliminated from the body by several routes. Urinary excretion, we have discussed this thing in the previous module. Water soluble products are filtered out of the blood by kidney and excreted into the urine. Exhalation, volatile compounds are exhaled by the breathing. Now, usually this excretion route is the biliary excretion via fecal excretion. Compounds can be extracted by the liver, excreted into the bile, and these bile drain into the small intestine and eliminated into the feces. Metabolism. Usually metabolism is the process by which the administered chemical, that is the parent compound, are modified by the organism by enzymatic reactions. 1 degree objective is to make the chemical agent more water soluble and easier to excrete, decrease the lipid solubility, decrease amount at target, increase ionization by increasing excretion rate or decrease the toxicity. Bioactivation, usually biotransformation, can result in the formation of reactive metabolites. This can drastically affect the rate of clearance of compound, can occur at any point during the compound's journey from absorption to excretion. The key organ in the biotransformation are liver. Liver plays a very vital role, or you can say among all available organ, liver plays the highest role. The lung, kidney, intestine, they are you can say having the medium role, and others which we will discuss in due course of time have a very low contribution towards the biotransformation. Usually we have to know that what are the biotransformation pathway. The phase 1 is to make the toxicant more water soluble. Phase 2, that is the links with the soluble endogenous agents like conjugations, etc. Now you can see in this particular table that the various compounds without metabolism and with metabolism, how much the biotransformation affects. Ethanol, 4 weeks without metabolism, and with metabolism for 10 ml in an hour. DDT, infinity, and days to weeks. So it all depends that with metabolism and without metabolism, what is the responses towards the chemical. So in this particular module, we have studied about the various aspects of dose versus response, different parameters, how we can go ahead with the qualitative as well as the quantitative analysis, because these are the integral part. In the subsequent module, we will study that what are the chemical parameters and what is the individual susceptibility towards those parameters while creating the dose versus response. Thank you.